What's up, guys? Today we're going to look at building an A2019 bot specifically to complete the RPA challenge. So I want to create this video for a couple reasons. One, I want to try to build a bot on A2019 since we haven't done that as a bot build very much yet. Two, a lot of the bots that I've been showing I've already built, so I'm going to walk through the whole build process with you. If you want to build along with me, that's awesome. Let's do that. And three, I want to show what I'm looking at when I build bots from start to finish. That's not to say this is the best way or the only way to do it. This is just how I do it. And I want to share with you how I kind of approach these different problems, the way that I look at them, the way that I solve them. The interesting thing about the RPA Challenge website is there's lots of different ways to solve the same problem. And I think it's really helpful as you start to get into your own builds that you understand how to build and why I'm building the way that I am and the different ways that you might troubleshoot to fix problems, because a lot of those problems will come up, and HTML changes, people aren't using object IDs where you think they should. So we're going to look at all of that and how we can solve for some of that and make a really stable bot. Okay, so let's get started. So the first thing we want to look at is the challenge itself. So let's go to the website. This is at rpachallenge.com. Honestly, I'm not sure who actually owns this or set this up, but it is very popular on a lot of RPA forums and subreddits, and you see people commenting on this a lot. And the challenge here, or the purpose of this website, so what you're going to do is you will have a bot that will download the Excel spreadsheet. The Excel spreadsheet has, I think it's employees, but 10 employees on the spreadsheet, and it has 7 pieces of data for each employee. So you have the first name, the last name, email, company name, phone number, address, and their role. Okay, and so what happens is you'll hit this start button here, and as you go through, you notice when I hit start there, these fields are going to move around. So not only is the order going to change, but the layout is going to completely change. Sometimes you've just got one column, sometimes you've got 2 columns. So the order that the fields appear, as well as the layout, is totally changing every time. And so the goal with this is to try to build a bot that's able to keep up with that, and then able to submit all of the data correctly, and ideally in the fastest time possible. To be completely honest, I'm less concerned about having it go lightning fast so much as I am just having the data correct and making sure we've built something that we really understand, right? So that's what we're going to focus on this time around. When I start something like this, I'm going to go back to reset here, so we're back to the kind of the plain RPA challenge. So when I start a build like this, right, we kind of talk through exactly what it needs to do. We have a rough idea of what that might look like. I like to go through and actually map out what my bot needs to do, because that helps me to make sure that as I'm building it, that I'm kind of checking all those boxes of the thing the bot needs to do. So I'm going to go to draw.io, and this is like a online version of Visio, but it will allow you to map out a kind of a process flow to create just a visual representation of what you're trying to do. So I'm going to say decide later. I probably won't save this one. But the first thing I want my bot to be able to do, and we'll just go through and make some basic notes on this. The first thing I want it to do is it's got to launch the RPA challenge page. We'll be using Chrome for this build, or I'm going to use Chrome. You can use IE if you want to. But the first thing it's got to do is launch that page. And so we're going to have to make sure that we're using one of the application actions so that we can launch Chrome and then also navigate to that page. The next thing we want to do is, let's see, we're going to kind of build this on the fly, and then we'll go build it actually in AA. What we're going to do here is we're going to do a decision, and man, these arrows are going to screw me up. Let's just say file exists, okay? And we're going to check to see if the file already exists, meaning that customer details or whatever, that employee details thing. We're going to check if it exists. If it does not exist, then we're going to download it. So we'll say download, and let's do an arrow here. And hopefully me talking through all of this isn't super annoying, but this is what you're gonna have to put up with to see the build. So if file exists, I don't know if we can put a label on this. Can we type here? Yeah, perfect. All right, so if file exists, no, then we're gonna download it. Otherwise, we're going to come down here and we will open file. Okay, so we're not going to get super fancy, but obviously this is something we're going to test multiple times. So we want to at least make sure that we're not just downloading the file over and over again, because that's not really going to be helpful. And after we've got that kind of situated, and we'll put that in our code here in a little bit. Let's put a yes here. There we go. All right, that's not the cleanest looking thing in the world, but I think you can get what I'm getting at there. So we're going to open the file, and when we open the file, we're going to need to iterate through each of the lines of the file to extract all of that employee's information. Now, if we look back at the challenge here, when you hit start, right, it's going to say round 1, and for round 1, I need to put the first real data row of the Excel spreadsheet in all of the fields, right? So it's not like I'm looking up like a ID or something like that. I need to put in whatever's the first Excel spreadsheet line into this first record, and then hit submit, and then start over, and then hit submit, and then do the next line, right? So I'll keep going like that. So what we're going to be doing is ultimately extracting data from the Excel spreadsheet in a loop, and then inside of that loop, we'll go through and actually fill out the fields for the RPA challenge. So when we open the file, that obviously only has to happen once. Inside of that, though, we'll be doing, let's say, extract fields. Okay, so we're going to extract all the fields. I'm going to suggest let's take advantage of some of the new functionality in A2019, and we will extract those fields and store them in a dictionary. The reason I want to store them in a dictionary is so that as we start to map those fields to, or map that Excel data to the fields on the RPA Challenge website, I think the dictionary is going to come in handy. And so we'll see that work out. It's also a good opportunity for us to maybe use a data type we haven't used before. So if you're not familiar with it, a dictionary data type is kind of like a list of key value pairs. And so we'll be able to put like the key is first name and the value is John, and the key is last name and the value is Smith, right? So we can go through and create basically a list of paired values so that when we want to fill in the form, we can do so. So we're going to extract the fields. We'll put one more kind of flowchart thing on here that we'll say store in dictionary. Okay, cool. So once we've got that, then we're going to start to actually map our fields or our Excel values to the actual page. And so we're going to, let's see how we're going to do this. What I'd like to do for this particular challenge is we're going to try to read the field label, and then based on the field label, we'll fill in the corresponding field, right? So if company name is first, we're going to read company name. We're going to go look that up in our dictionary. We're going to figure out what the company name is for that record, and then map that value to the field. And we'll do the same thing for email and address and last name. And then when the order changes, this should still work, right? So we're going to try that out. And what we'll do is we're going to store in dictionary, and then we will, let's say, loop through RPA challenge fields. And that's where we're going to extract the, we'll kind of put this over to the side to represent our loop. Extract field label. I wonder if I can just copy and paste these. That would be a lot quicker. All right, bear with me here. Extract field label, look up label in dictionary. Can't spell. and then we'll fill field with dictionary value. Right, and so this label will actually be our key that we're going to be looking up here. So we'll mark that out. Okay. So this scrolling doesn't work perfect, but that's kind of the general flow. If I were doing this for a real business process, I might go a little bit more detailed. I think for right now, this is probably going to be fine. This is the general direction that we want to go. You might say, well, why don't I just map that out in Automation Anywhere directly? Well, I like to just be able to talk through it like this so I can kind of visually see how things are laid out and create those different shapes and put them in different places if I know I'm doing a loop. I don't necessarily want to get overwhelmed with the commands right away, so it's sometimes helpful to just draw it out in a diagram like that, at least for me. So I'm going to minimize that and we'll leave that open in the background. Let's go back to our control room. I am using Community Edition for this one, so you should be able to follow along exactly like I am. I'll eventually create this in something other than Community Edition so I can export it and share this bot if you want to try to import mine. Let's do RPA challenge bot as a name. And I will hit create and edit. Okay. I'm also going to make sure we use lots of steps here. I'm a big fan of steps. After creating lots of processes in version 11, things get kind of messy when you have 200 lines and they're only really divided up by big comment blocks that you tried to add. So I really like steps. We're going to try and use those for this particular build. So for each step, you can give a title. I'm just going to call this one, let's say, open page, and we'll use ampersand to keep this small. Download file. Okay, so this will take care of that first stuff that we said we're going to do. While we're at it, let's just create another step here. And I want it outside, I don't want it inside. And we'll call this one extract. Let's call it extract Excel fields. Cool. So the name really doesn't matter. And again, steps are really just for grouping purposes, and you can kind of like minimize your commands inside of them if you don't want to see all of them at one time. I'm also going to be building in dual mode just because once we start to get into some looping and especially some nested loops, it gets easier for me to be able to see it in this dual view, specifically in the list view. So we'll do that. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is let's go to the application package and we will find the open program file. I'm going to drag that guy right in here. Again, notice that it shows the dotted lines on both the flow view and the list view. It really doesn't matter. I could drag to either one and it represents the same thing. So, whatever you're comfortable with using. So for the location of the program or file we're going to open, this will be our Google Chrome exe. So I think I just updated my bot agent right before this video went on. So we might have a couple of these sessions where we're downloading dependencies because things are being updated. I think this is the bot agent version 3.3. So for what it's worth, it should work the same though with 3.0 or whatever version is current flavor right now. We might be able to shortcut this process a little bit if we just open Explorer, maybe. And I'm just going to go to C, Program Files x86, Google, Chrome. So this kind of opened at the same time, so I'm not really going to save a ton of time. All right. C, Program Files x86, Google, Chrome, Application, and Chrome exe. I'll hit open. I'm going to minimize this guy. Okay, so there's the full path to the application we want to launch. What we'll also give here in the parameters field is the exact URL we want to navigate to. So I'm going to put http://www.rpachallenge.com, and I will hit apply. All right, so far we're good on that. Let's try to download the file from RPA Challenge, because let's hit download Excel. All right, so it's going to download to your default downloads directory. It looks like I already had it from before, but I'm going to delete that extra one I have. So I've got Challenge XLSX here. I don't actually have Excel installed on this virtual machine that I'm working off of here. So we're going to do all of this sans Excel. If you wanted to open it up and look at it, you could do so. I open it up locally on my other machine where I actually have Excel installed, so I kind of understand the structure of this thing. But basically it's a header, and then I think 10 total data rows, each representing this data that we talked about earlier. So the reason I want to have that in my downloads directory is because when I come back into my bot builder here, what I'm going to look for are the file operation commands. And specifically, actually let's not do that. Let's go to if. We're going to go to if, and we'll add that right here after our open program file. And for my if on the condition, I'm going to say file, let's say does not exist. And I'm going to browse out to that file path. So that was in downloads, and then challenge XLSX, and I'll hit apply. So what we're saying here is if this file does not exist, then what should we do? This is a conditional statement, so what that means is when the condition is true, whatever's inside it will actually execute. So let's go here to recorder, and we're going to do a capture here. So what we're saying is if the file does not exist, then I need to download it. And so I'm going to refresh this page just to make sure that we're back on what the bot would be seeing at the time of execution. I'm going to click window here. I will hit the refresh button so it will refresh. Again, this is going to poll to tell Automation Anywhere all of the windows that I currently have open. The one I'm specifically concerned with is this one, the RPA Challenge. And I'm going to click Capture Object. I'm going to highlight over this Download Excel button over here. There it is. Okay, so see now that it's got a red box around it, I will left click. We'll see a post processor appear here to record the capture itself. It just records like an image so that you can review it later. I'll also pay attention to things like the DOMXPath, HTML tag, download. I'm going to uncheck this inner text only because I know that there's an icon on there and I don't want that to possibly screw things up. I'll leave path as it exists, and we'll say left click. Cool. All right, so that part should be good, and when I'm building these personally, I will test very frequently, right? So I've got like 3 or 4 commands here. This should be running. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my downloads directory. I'm going to delete this file because I want to make sure that it does not exist. I'm also going to close the RPA challenge window, and then I'm going to hit run. Oops. I'm going to save and then hit run. So the reason that I do this is I don't want to get 15 steps deep and find that my bot isn't working at all, and the stuff that I thought I would be able to rely on for steps 11, 12, 13, I want to make sure that steps 1 through 10 are actually working so that 11 through whatever will actually work. And so when I'm doing my bot builds, I will very frequently do this kind of testing every 3 or 4 steps just to make sure I'm good. Now, once I'm kind of in a rhythm and I know exactly what I'm doing, like when we get to the Excel extraction steps and we start to just read the data from the fields, I don't need to stop in between every 3 fields to make sure that it's working. I'll probably just do all of them, and then I'll be good at the end. But you know, especially when I've got these new segments that I'm starting, I do like to make sure that I've got stuff working. So that worked successfully. Notice that the bot launched the page. I click the download button. I can see that I have my challenge XLSX in tow, so I'm good to go. So our first part is done. When we're doing our testing and this kind of thing comes up, we always want to make sure to separate these two windows. If it is a background tab, I'm not going to be able to select it for my recording steps. So just make sure to keep that on a separate window. All right, so we're good there. The next thing we need to do is start to extract our Excel fields. So we're going to be using the Excel Basic package here. And the difference between Excel Basic and Excel Advanced is that with Excel Basic, you don't actually have to have Excel installed, and you can still use the Excel commands. Note that it's only going to work on XLSX files, so just keep that in mind. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go to Open, and that will allow us to open our file. In this case, we're going to be opening a desktop file because we just downloaded it. So I'm going to hit Browse. We will navigate out to find that Excel file that we were just talking about. I don't remember what it was called. Employee list or something like that. We'll find it here in a second. Challenge.xlsx. All right, so let's go to Downloads, Challenge XLSX, and hit Open. Perfect. For this, I'm going to leave it at read-write mode. We're not actually going to make any changes to it, so it doesn't really matter. And I'm going to hit Apply. All right, I'm also going to start to create some variables here. And usually I will try to create at least the variables I know about on my diagram that I'm creating. But we forgot to do that. So let's go ahead and just create some here. Let's create variables for all of the data that we're going to extract from the Excel spreadsheet. So I'm going to do S first name string. So for those values that are string, I'm going to be prefixing with an S. Last name. I might have to cheat back here to look at what these fields are called on the. So last name, we'll do role in company and company name. S role in company. This is actually called a Hungarian notation. So when you add a prefix to represent the data or the data type, that is called a Hungarian notation, where it's followed by camel case. Company name, fun fact for everyone who has made it this far. Let's go to the next one. Address, email, and phone number. All right, so I think we got them all. S address, S email, and S phone number. Cool. So just to note here, when we created all those variables, string was the default type that was selected. You could obviously go and create any kind of data type you wanted. Even for phone number, even though it's all numbers, because we're not really performing any kind of calculations on the data, it's totally fine to leave that as a string. There's really no reason to have it as a number, in my opinion, unless you're going to be doing calculations on it. So when we think about money, or we think about time, or things like that, we would want to use different data types, especially when we're doing calculations. But in this case, we're good with strings and everything. The other thing we're going to create here is a dictionary data type. And so let's go to dictionary. And I'm just going to prefix this one with a D. And let's call it Excel record. Let's see. Do we want to do... Let's do some keys, but let's leave the value part blank. So when we do our key, so that we can get this to work the way that we kind of talked about in the beginning, we want to make sure that we match exactly the way that these fields appear here, right? So like this one, I'm going to start with first name. And actually, let's do this. We're going to do side by side so we can get this totally correct. I'm going to do capital F, first, space, name. And so with keys, it's really just a string. It's not, you can have spaces and stuff like that. Last space name. For this key, we're going to do role in company. Actually, you know what? We should follow the order that they're going to be in the Excel spreadsheet. Let me cheat and open that up on my other machine so I can tell you exactly what order that is so we don't screw this up. 1 second. Downloads. All right, here we go. So this is on my local machine. This is what the actual spreadsheet looks like. So it's first name, last name. So we're going to do company name and then role in company. So let's do company name, role in company, and then we have address, and then email, and last but not least, phone number. Awesome. So we've got that, and we're good. Okay. Let's maximize this and go back to our build. All right. So we've got the Excel spreadsheet open. Now we want to start to read from the Excel spreadsheet and store the spreadsheet values in our variables. So we're going to go to get single cell. Let me think. We actually want to do a loop first. Let's do the loop before we actually start opening this stuff up. So loop. We know there's 10 records. I'm just going to leave it on 10 times. Yeah, we'll stick to that. So 10 times. And then we're going to go to, actually let's do 11. We'll get a little bit fancy with this. 11 times, and we're going to say, let's do a counter for this too. Because in version 11 there was a counter value, but we don't have that anymore. So let's create a number value for our Excel. We'll do Excel counter here, and I prefix this with an N, so that's going to be a number value. Okay. Default value is going to be, let's start it at 1. Okay. So I want to point out here that I did miss one thing when recording this video originally. If you see the drop down there that says assign the current value to the variable, we really need to select a number value for that, and that will control the looping and essentially act as our counter. When recording the video, you'll see that what I ended up doing was creating a value and incrementing it manually. While that works, it's much easier to handle it with this drop down. So if you want to follow along, that's fine, but know that probably the best way to do it is to select a value from that drop down, create a number value there. It will take care of incrementing it automatically, and then you don't have to handle those manually. So we're going to loop 11 times. The first iteration through the loop, though, I'm typing first. The first iteration through the loop, we want to do an if statement, though, because we don't want to extract data from that first row, because that first row is actually a header. So we're going to say if number, let's do in Excel counter is greater than 1, that's when we can start to take our action. So now we'll get back to our Excel basic commands here, and we will get single cell. All right, so we want to get the contents of a specific cell, and again, because we're looping, we're going to try and do this dynamically as possible. So the position of our first record is on A2, right? So we've got our first name at A2, last name at B2, C2, right? So we're going to try and repeat this as we go through and iterate through these different rows. So I know that John Smith, or John, I guess, is in A2. So for cell, I'm going to give A, and then I'm going to insert a variable here by pressing F2. And this is where I want to use my, actually, you know what? It won't let me do that. We're going to type a variable here. So I'm going to use a $sign. We're going to type in Excel counter. And then it won't actually let me put a number value in there. So what we're going to have to do is we'll type a dot before that last $sign, and we're going to say toString. And what this is going to do is it's basically going to convert that data to a string on the fly. So essentially what we're saying here is on our second iteration of the loop, this cell name will be the equivalent of A2, which would be John, which would be our first name. So we're going to store that in first name and hit apply. We're going to need to repeat that for the last name, company name, rolling company, etc. But we also want to map that value to our dictionary. So let's do a put here right after that Excel command. And for dictionary value, we're going to use our DXL record. Associate to this key, we're going to say first name. You know what? I think we didn't actually have to predefine all of those dictionary values, but we did it anyway. So associate to this key, and we're going to say S first name. Assign previous value to variable. This is actually required, and even though we don't have anything in there, I'm just going to fill in prompt assignment, just like as a trash data placeholder. So we'll just leave that like that. So we've got this kind of two command set here, and what I'm going to do, and actually I'll do this over here so it's a little bit easier. I'm going to copy and paste those a couple times, and I want to keep them. That didn't work exactly like I wanted. I want to keep them together. Wow, that definitely didn't work like I wanted. Put it right there. Because we're going to have to do that dictionary move and then the Excel move for each of those fields. So this one, which is my second Excel extraction, I'm going to put as B. And again, this would be 2 already, so I'm good there. And this should be last name. And then I'll update this dictionary. Oops, I forgot to hit apply here. I'm going to update this dictionary with last name and associate to this key last name. And again, we'll leave prompt assignment because we don't really care what happens to the old value. And then the third one is going to be company name. So let's make this C2 and store contents in company name. Again, just make sure you hit apply after we do all these. And then our dictionary is company name. And again, if you want to copy and paste these from the Excel, that's totally fine too, like the headers, because we do want to make sure we get those right. And then company name there, prompt assignment. All right, so we've got 3 of them done. Let's try to copy this, see if we can do it a little bit cleaner. Okay, let's highlight off that and put it right here. There, that worked better. That's better. All right, so I'm going to come back up here. Company name was the last one we did. That's right, so we'll leave that. I'm going to come down to rolling company. And hold on a second. We have to, yeah, we'll do this in a second. Rolling company, prompt assignment, that's fine. We have to do line 15. This one's got to be D, I think. Yep. D, and then rolling company. Sorry, I'm kind of referencing the spreadsheet here on my other screen so I can look at both. All right, so that's rolling company there. This one should be E, and this will map to address. Hit apply. So this should be address. This would be address. You know, when I build these in my room by myself, I don't actually speak out loud when I'm doing it, so hopefully this isn't terribly annoying for you. All right, email. Actually, let's be honest, I do. I talk to myself. This will be email as well as the key. And then this will be email. And then last one is phone number. So we'll copy these last two guys one more time. Click off it and put it right here. There we go. So get single cell. That's going to be G. And that will be phone number. And then finally, this will be, we'll leave that as prompt assignment. This will be phone number. And this will be phone number. And you'll see in a second why I'm so specific about the naming of these. All right. So we've looped through. We have extracted our data there. You know, just to keep things clean, let's do a step inside of our loop. And we'll put our if statement and all of the data manipulation, or filling our dictionary there, and we'll just call this one map to dictionary and hit apply. All right, like I said, we'll do just a little bit of testing here just to make sure these are working. So let's see. We actually want this to go inside of that loop because I want to have it run at the very end. So I'm going to open that up and put it right inside there. Move it one down. There we go. And that's why I like to have both up at the same time, because sometimes it's kind of hard to like drag a command in the right place, but when I've got the dual view up, it's easier for me to do that. Let's not check every single field. Let's just do like first name colon, and then you can hit F2 to bring up the variable explorer. I will enter first name here, and then last name colon F2 last name, and then it'll also do phone, just like to make sure we got the last one right. So phone number, and let's hit yes, insert. All right. Let's close these after 5 seconds too. Sorry. All right, let's try and run this and see how we're doing. Again, this is why I like to do the testing over and over again, just to make sure that we've got it right. We just added 10 commands there. I was copying and pasting, so it would be relatively easy to screw that up, I think. So I did want to make sure to have a way to test that before we get all the way down to like, hey, we're mapping fields and now nothing is working because we didn't do our data extraction correctly. So I'll do this kind of testing quite a bit. Sometimes I'll even have another bot open in another window and like use it as a scratchpad bot, right? Where I just do like opening the Excel spreadsheet and doing all those commands just to make sure that that kind of stuff is working before I try to integrate that into my actual bot. So that can be another helpful tip. And I think this would have been an appropriate place to do that, where I just wanted to practice extracting stuff from an Excel spreadsheet. That would work. I'm sure people will, oh, so that did not work. Let's see what's going on here. Loop 11 times. Oh, wow. We forgot to increment. So let's go to number. I was getting ready to say that I think people will probably comment that I could have done the looping based on Excel itself. I did not do that. I've had trouble with the Excel looping from time to time, so I was just going to do it this way. Let's go right here, and we'll increment our number. So let's enter in Excel counter. We're going to increment by 1. We're going to have the output go to the same variable, and we'll hit apply. So when you're managing and maintaining the loops yourself, that is something you'll have to be concerned with, is making sure you increment that value to make sure you're getting that right. So let's see how this does. I think you could probably also do the Excel to dictionary kind of value mapping in a more dynamic way as well. I think the way you'd want to do that is you could do a list of A through G, since that was our columns, and basically you could loop through that list while also looping through, kind of looping through sideways and looping through vertically. In that way you could kind of get away with mapping stuff to the dictionary with only a few lines. We can do that in another video if you guys want, but for right now we'll just leave it like this. Alright, so I'm just kind of spot checking these. Jane Dorsey, Albert Kipling, and the phone number. Okay, so I think these are good. I'm gonna just accelerate this by hitting close a couple times here. If your data was correct, awesome. If not, you may go back and just check a couple of those commands. We got a little bit crazy with some of the copying and pasting we were doing before. So if some of these got copied and pasted in a wrong order or something like that, that's totally possible to have that be a little bit screwed up. So definitely go and check that. All right, I'm actually going to put this if statement. I think I like that better up here. And then I'm going to put all of this stuff inside of the map to dictionary. There we go. And then this I actually want outside of that. So this is where I'm going to switch over to this view. This step belongs inside here, and my increment belongs outside of that. So this would go right here. Let's see if this lines up. Yep. So that looks good. If counter is greater, actually this needs to go down one more. I'm trying to see how that lines up. No, this needs to go up one right here, I think. Actually, one more. Pretty sure that's right. If it's not right, we'll fix it later. All right, so now we have our data, and what we want to do is we're going to try to actually start to map stuff to our fields. So let's do another step here. And this still needs to go over. Let's go back to flow view here, or dual, I'm sorry. Oh, there it is. Lost it there for a second. All right. So we're going to adjust where this step falls. We actually want it to be inside of that same if statement, because we only want to map fields if we've actually extracted data. And I'm going to call this one map to website. Okay. So let's talk about how we would actually do that. The approach that we talked about in the beginning was that what we would do is we will look at different elements on the page and then try to extract their data dynamically so that we can know what order the fields are coming in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to, I'm in Chrome, I just right clicked on the label here and I'm going to hit inspect. And if you're not super familiar with HTML, that's totally fine. All I'm looking for is just, you can highlight over the different code here. I want to see where that label itself is actually highlighted. And here I can see the label tag and its last name. So what I'm going to do is right click on that and I'm going to say copy XPath. And let's open up a notepad document. And again, I'm talking you through this because this is exactly how I solve these kind of problems. So what a DOMXPath is basically the address to this particular object within the document. And so if you and I were sharing a computer and you said, hey, I've got this one folder, it's inside of my documents, it's got my photos in it, I need you to grab something for me, right? you would tell me the path to that exact folder you needed me to grab, and I would go copy the files. Think of this the exact same way, right? This is from the root of the HTML document going all the way into the body, into the app root, into that second div, right? This is the exact path down to that particular label that we just highlighted. What I'm going to do is I'm going to copy a couple DOMXPaths for the different labels to see what they have in common. So let's go to inspect here. I'm going to look for the one that says role and company. Let's do the same thing. I'm going to copy XPath and we'll paste that guy in here. And let's do one more just to make sure we can identify if there's a pattern. So I'm going to go to inspect on company name. I'm going to right click and say copy XPath. All right, so we see that mostly these are the exact same path, but there is one field that's changing, right? And it's this div here. And so just to make sure we totally understand this, let's go down to the first name, hit inspect. In this case, it's the very last field. We're going to say copy XPath. We'll paste that into our notepad document. If our theory is correct, this is the, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7th field. So this should have div 7 in it, and it does. So what we're going to try and do is we're going to set up a variable so that we can dynamically read this label versus this label versus this label versus this label. And we want to follow that exact same pattern to read the label, right? So we're going to see the label says first name, or in this case last name. We're going to look that up in our dictionary to figure out what's the value that's associated with that key, and then we're going to map that value to the field. So the same way that we just got the DOMXPaths for our, and let's put a label on these, label. Let's do the same thing for our fields. So let's go to fields, and I'm going to right click on this field, go to inspect. I'll highlight over it just to make sure that looks like it's the correct object. I'm going to right click and say copy XPath. Let's paste that in there. Oops. Let's do, oops, hold on. Let's do full XPath on this one because that gave me the based on the object ID, and we don't want to use that for this particular case because these object IDs change every single page refresh. So copy full XPath for this one, and we'll go down here and paste. There we go. Let's do the same thing for rolling company. Inspect, copy full XPath. Okay. So this is following the exact same pattern, and we'll check this one more time just to make sure on our very last one here, full XPath. Okay, cool. So that's following the exact same pattern. It just ends in an input instead of a label, so that's fine. We've got those two paths. We're going to dynamically use them so that we can basically read from that field and then fill in what our target value should be. If you notice there, I did full XPath because if you look, each of these objects has an HTML ID. And when we're talking about an XPath, an HTML ID is a unique identifier for that particular object on a page. At least it should be, right? The way that this page works, and let me hit submit here and we can prove this. I can go to what was first name on that last page and see that it's actually generating like just totally random IDs for every one of these fields. Okay? And they're doing that on purpose because they want to make this more challenging for you. If it was as easy as just mapping to a specific HTML ID, this would be a really easy challenge. But because they have a new HTML ID on every single page reload there, you're not going to be able to map to an ID. You're going to have to figure out a different way to do it. And so we wanted the full XPath, which says from the root of the document all the way down to this particular input, what's the path, as opposed to what's the path as referenced by the HTML ID. All right, so let's go back to our, I'm going to refresh this back to how it was. And let's go back to our bot building. All right, so map to website. What we want to do is we're going to do another loop. And so we're going to do another loop counter. So let's do in field counter. We'll call it that. It's important to give your variables meaningful names. Sometimes you have to get creative as to what really meaningful means. And let's default this to 1 because our fields for the DOMXPath here are 1 based. They're not 0 based. So we might as well start with 1. We'll save ourselves a value assignment. Typically my rule is don't assign values by default. Counters is the one exception to that. So if it's like company name or any of these other values, I don't want you to put a value in like directly right here as a default. I don't think that's a great practice because it makes it really challenging to figure out where values are being set. Counters is the one time I will break that rule. If it's a counter value, usually I'll set it if I know it's going to need to be a 1 based or 0 based or whatever. So what we're going to do is we are going to try to do our mapping. Now, when we're using the counter as a part of a DOMXPath, we're going to have to convert that to a string first. So let's do one more, and it's going to be S field counter. Let's try this. Hang with me here, you'll see what I'm doing. So the first thing we need to do is create a loop. And that will allow us to loop through the fields of that page. And if we go back to look at the page, there's 7 total fields. So we're going to set our loop to, in times, we're going to set this to 7. Assign the current value to variable. Let's do field counter here. And we'll hit apply. Alright. So we're going to go through 7 times. I'm going to do let's do string. And I think we're going to do, number to string. Let's add this right here. Our number is going to be our in field counter. We're going to do insert. We don't want any decimals. And then we're going to map that to S field counter. Perfect. So what we're going to try and do is we're going to do a recorder step, but we're going to customize the DOMXPath. Again, I didn't say this was an easy build, so hang with me here. I'll explain it as we go through. So let's add this. Let's put it right here. So I sometimes have trouble seeing how to drop this. Yeah, we're going to need to move it. So we're going to go up inside of our loop, but we want it after the number to string thing. There we go. So here's our recorder. Let's make sure we have RPA challenge page ready. Looks good. Let's hit window. We can select our RPA challenge and hit capture object. So like I said, the first thing that we're going to capture is we want to capture the field label itself. And we forgot a variable because we want some place to store that. So we'll create a variable here when we get back. But what we're going to do is we're going to try and do a capture on this field label right here, which is our very first one. So when it highlights over the label itself, I'm going to click, got a red arrow, or red border, sorry. Let's go back here as it finishes up that capture. Oh, let's redo the capture. Hang on a second. Refresh this. Okay. RPA challenge, capture object. There we go. Highlight over address. There we go. Now it's doing its post-processing. I don't know what happened that first time. I must have clicked around too much. Go back here. So address. Now, this is where we need to be concerned about our customization of the capture. I don't want anything that specifically references the address or this particular HTML ID. And so I'm going to go through and look at this. I don't want the path because that's going to change. And actually, it recorded the HTML ID, but it's not on here, so that's fine. Inner HTML is what we actually are concerned with extracting, but I'm going to leave that off right here. So inside of our DOMXPath, let's delete everything out of that, and we didn't have to do that, I guess. I'm gonna put in this, which was our first one there, and I want to pay special attention to this one. So I'm gonna put an X here so that we can easily find it. I'm gonna copy right here. I'll put that back in there. Okay, where we find that X, I'm gonna delete it, and I'm gonna hit F2. And here is where I want to insert the, let's see, this should be a string. So let's just start typing it because it didn't let us select it. So $, come on, $, what was the value? In S field counter, $. All right, so it didn't like anything but me typing that manually. So you may have to do that yourself. But pay close attention. We can go back to the variables here, make sure we got that right. S field counter, that looks like it's correct. I'm going to hit apply. We're not totally done with that one yet, though. We didn't choose our action. So let's go back down here. For our action, we're actually going to get a property. And the property we want to get, and let's go back to the object properties here to see all of them. The one we want to get is inner HTML. So let's go down here. We will type in inner. Let me make sure if it has a space or not. I don't remember how they formatted this. Address. Inner HTML, no space. And spell inner right. Cool. We're going to assign the output to, let's say, S current field label. Actually, this is going to be an any data type. Let's say cancel. I'm just going to create it over here. The anything would work. I'm too crazy. So S current field label, and we'll leave that. And then let's also create one more for current field text. S current input text. Current input text. Let's do that. All right. So this will be current field label, and we'll hit apply. And then let's see. So now we want to look up that value on the dictionary. So let's go to dictionary here. We'll say get. Let's put it right here. So dictionary value, our dictionary Excel record, our key is going to be that label, right? And that's why I said it's so important for us to make sure we have those keys correct when we define it in the dictionary, because we're literally going to extract the text from this label and then look it up in the dictionary. So let's go to select our variable here. So for key, I'm going to hit F2, and our key is going to be current field label. Hit insert. I'm going to assign the output to current input text and hit apply. And then I think we have one more thing we need to do. Well, two more things. Let's see. Loop 7 times. Yeah, we have two more things we have to do. So the first is we want to do another recorder step. So let's do recorder. This is where we're actually going to map. Let's do it right here. This is where we're going to map the field value from the dictionary that we just grabbed to the actual input field. So let's go to Window, RPA Challenge, Google Chrome, Capture. I'm going to highlight over this input field here, hit click, I really like the recording in A2019 compared to older versions. That goofy like click and hold thing can be challenging. So this one's a lot easier to figure out. We're going to follow the same principles that we did before. We don't want that DOMXPath. We don't want this HTML ID on there. That's fine. We don't want this path either. Everything else we can leave alone. So the reason we don't want these is because this references, like we talked about before, a very specific HTML ID, and that's going to screw us up. So we're going to delete that out of there actually, and we will use the same technique we did before. This is the incrementing div, so we're going to hit X there. We'll copy this, paste that in, and then where that X is, we're just going to have to type manually again. Let's get it up so we can see it. S field counter. And there we go. So it has to be S field counter because it has to be a string. We can't put a number value in there. It has to be a string. So that's why we had to create that extra conversion to string. So we have that path. That should be correct. HTML type is text. Has frame, we can leave that, doesn't really matter. The tag is input, so that'll be important to make sure we include that. And then role is text box. Oh, get rid of the HTML name. We don't want that either. That matches the HTML ID, so we don't want that. For our action, notice we have some different actions here because this is an input field as opposed to something else. I'm going to hit set text. And here, I will hit F2. And we're going to say current input text. And we'll hit yes, insert. And then hit apply. Just like we did before with our number incrementing, we're going to have to do that for our loop here. So let's do a number command. And we'll do increment. And I'm going to drop that right here. And our number will be field counter. We're going to increment it by 1, assign that back to field counter, and hit apply. There's one other thing that we're missing here. All that should be good. We don't have anything right now to click the buttons. So we're going to have to add 2 button clicks in here that we didn't add yet. One to click this start button to basically kick off the process and begin it. The next to hit the submit button, which only has to occur after we've filled out an entire record. So let's go back and figure out a good place to do that start button. We only want it to run once. Let's do it right after this Excel basic open. So let's do record. Do it right after this guy. Window, RPA challenge, capture object, start button. This one's going to be kind of tough to see. There is a little bit of a red border there though, so we should be good. All right, switch back. Again, I don't care too much. Nothing here looks like it's too crazy that's going to throw me off. I'm going to leave the inner text on there too, just as an extra variable to check for. And we'll say action as left click and hit apply. And then the one other thing we need to do, which will be to hit that submit button. And it really only needs to happen inside of this loop. So I'm going to minimize some of this other stuff so we're not so confused here. Yeah, it can happen right before this. So let's add one more record step. We'll add it right there. And this will be RPA challenge, capture. This will be just to click that submit button after each record has been entered. So there, I think it's highlighted. Hit click. And hit apply. All right, so oops, I forgot to hit left click as the action. Sorry about that. Action is left click. Okay. this should all be okay because this is the only button for the input. So I think we'll still be okay on that one. If we have trouble with the submission, we'll check that. All right, so this should be the moment of truth. Let's see if this works. I'm going to hit save here. Let's close out of our RPA challenge window if you have it open someplace. And let's hit run. So we kind of did what I said we don't want to do, and that's like add a lot of code without testing at the very end there. Once we were inside of that nested loop, it becomes a little bit more difficult to do the testing like just with a small segment. You can't just do run from start here or something like that because you're already inside of at least one loop, and in this case we were inside two. So that's where I was mentioning earlier, like sometimes I'll have like a scratch pad kind of process open that I might use just to test little pieces and make sure they're working before I then go replicate that on my main bot. So just keep that in mind. If it's cool to do that if you need to. All right, let's see if this runs. Cross our fingers. Shouldn't download the Excel. Let's see. We forgot to take that out. Okay, I see one other thing we screwed up. So we'll fix both items because this is actually the second submission. So let's just stop it real quick. We're close. We're on the cusp of getting this. Let's close out of this. Okay, one thing that happened is our submit button. It actually clicked when we didn't want it to because it clicked on that first time. And our counter is 11, right? So we actually want this to be like one level inside. So let me move down here. We want this to be right here. There we go. The other thing is we still had that message box in here. So let's see if we can find that guy. I think it's inside this. There it is. So we will disable that and hit save. All right, I think that was the only thing I saw that looked like it was off. Let's try this again. Yeah, so order is obviously really important for this kind of stuff. And not to get on the soapbox, right? But when we think about the tenets of problem solving, right? I think of it as sequence, selection, and repetition. And as we go through and solve these different problems like this RPA challenge, we want to think about, okay, what lines am I creating and in what order are they going to execute? And just like we did with the map to dictionary, right, we had to pull it from Excel before we could actually map it into the dictionary value. So that was an important sequence. In the same way, when we have our selection statements, like when we're checking to see if the file already exists before we download it, right? We're checking there to see if a certain condition is true and then taking action otherwise. And then with our repetition, we've actually got two kind of series of repetition here. Let's see, is this good? Smith, IT Solutions. I think we're good. We've got two loops happening, right? The first loop is looping through our Excel spreadsheet. And then for each iteration of our Excel spreadsheet, we're also looping through all of the fields in the RPA Challenge website to figure out what the labels are and then to dynamically map the value from what we had recorded in the dictionary to the actual field itself. So we're going to let this guy finish. This is one way to solve this problem. I think this is a pretty reliable way and a pretty dynamic way, especially when we're talking about the way we're mapping the fields to the page itself. If we ended up having more fields on here, all we'd have to do is basically change that counter. And if we really wanted to be dynamic, we could have done a recorder step on the page itself to see how many input fields there were, and then use that to determine how we're going to do our loop. And that would be like as dynamic as possible, because that way if they added a 8th or 9th or 10th field on here, our bot would still be okay, right? Because it's going off of a dynamic number of how many fields it found and setting the loop accordingly. So, we could have built that kind of stuff into it. I know in this case we knew there were 7 fields, so we set our loop to go 7. I was trying to keep it somewhat simple, but if you wanted to take it a step further, that would be another option. We also didn't do a ton with error handling in this particular example, so you could have tried to start to introduce a try-catch block if we had issues with stability or anything like that. Let me see what one we're on here. Michelle Norton. So this is 8 of 10. We should be seeing Stacy and then Laura, and I think we're done. All right, last one. Let's see. This will tell us. So the page will actually give you a feedback at the end of like how long it took and then also your accuracy. We can, in the future, try to make one that goes a little bit faster if you want, but boom, 100% accuracy, 100 I guess that's 145 seconds. Would that be right? Well, that's probably right. A little over 2 minutes, maybe. Anyway, one last thing I want to look at. So let me just show you the code one last time. If you didn't get the success that you were expecting, or if you just want to talk through this one more time. Remember what we're doing. Our first step is to open the page, download the file, boom, we'll close that one. Pretty straightforward. The next is we're opening our Excel spreadsheet using the Excel basic command, and we're using our recorder to click that whatever button it was, start. In this case it says reset. Then we're looping 11 times. We're doing 11 because our spreadsheet technically has 11 rows, right? The first one is a header row, and then 10 real data rows. So that's why we have that at 11. We're checking to see if the counter is greater than 1, so that we know this is actually a data row and not just a header row. We're then going through and grabbing all of the data based on the cell. So we're saying A2, B2, C2, all the way through that to grab all the data. We're storing that in a dictionary. And remember, we said that a dictionary is key value pairs. And so we gave a very specific key that said first name, all capitalized correctly and formatted right. And then we put the person's first name in there. And that allows us to do a lookup based on that key so that we can pull back the value dynamically. We then went through to map the value to the website. What we said is, hey, there's 7 fields. Let's do this as dynamic as possible. We know the field order is changing around. We know the field locations are changing around. So what we're going to do is we're going to record exactly what the label is for every single field. We're going to look that label up in our little dictionary that we just created and then bring that value back to map that to the field. We're also going to increment our number because we're maintaining our own loop here. And then after we've looped through the 7 times, we'll click our submit button. I could see a common problem where if your recorder was like just one step in, right? If it was up here inside of my loop at a different place, then I might accidentally be clicking submit like 7 times. So that could be a common error that I could see happening here. Also making sure to maintain your counters here for your loops. If you did them the same way that I did, just make sure you keep track of those so that they can keep going. Okay? All right, so this went a tad longer than I expected, to be honest, but hopefully you found this helpful. This is the first way that came to my mind on how to solve this kind of problem using A2019. I'll do another video in a little bit of a different way to solve the same problem. We can look at the same RPA challenge. But definitely leave your feedback, leave comments, subscribe, like, share this video. Let me know how these help you. Let me know what else you want to see, and we can start to create that kind of content. Okay? Thanks. Go be great.